All right, today we're going to be applying some Marine SPAR Varnish. We're using the Rust-Oleum brand to our faux teak table that we set up and installed on our boat a few weeks ago. You want to make sure everything is clean. If you've used it, make sure you use some degreaser on there, get the grease off. And you want to make sure to use a fairly good soft bristle brush. In this case, I am using the Wooster Ultra Pro Firm, 2.5 inch. That way it doesn't take us forever with a smaller brush. For your varnish, make sure you do not shake the can. You can use a stir stick to stir it if it looks like it's separating, but do not shake it. You're going to create a bunch of bubbles in there and it will come out in the finish. So we're going to pop this guy open. Our tabletop is clean. We don't have to clean it. I'm just going to dust it off, make sure there's no bits of dirt or anything sitting on there, and then we'll go at it. We've got our varnish, and you want to make sure there's no air bubbles or anything floating around in there. If there is, let it sit, or use a separate container and use it out of there. So we're good to go here. We're going to dip about 1/4 of our brush. You don't want to dip any more than that. This stuff is fairly thick. You'll get good coverage. And we're going to start on one side. We'll get, since this is the narrow end this way, that's the long end, we'll start here, paint a strip, and then so on and so on. And we want to continue going that way. So let's get started. And you want to go with the direction of the grain for the most part. If you're noticing that you have a lot of lines, you may want to use a foam brush or a different bristle brush that's more fine. The cheaper lower end brushes will leave more marks. Don't apply it too thick, especially on the first coat, because you will have a lot longer of a dry time if you apply it too thick. So we got that last piece done. All right, continue on with the middle section. And you'll notice it is soaking in. That's good. That's what we want to see. You also don't want to apply this when it's too cold outside or too humid. If it is really humid, you can thin your varnish by about 10% or so, and that'll help it with quicker cure time if it's too humid outside. So we're going to continue going. Across just as you see. And when you finish a section, I like to go back and make sure all of the brush strokes are even. That way you've got a nice, even finish all around. So finish that row there. We're going to move on to the next section. Looks like we'll have, if I keep them about that same size, we'll have maybe 5 rows on this table. forget your edges. Make sure you've got a nice coat on your edges as well. And again, I'm going to go through that section, get nice even strokes. That way you don't see the start and stop points where you were brushing. And we'll move on to the next row. All right, you can stop it. The first coat is on. Went on really nice and even. And now you want to let it dry. Depending on what kind of spar varnish you're using, it may take several hours, it may take 24 hours. I'm going to let this one sit overnight, and hopefully it'll be good to go. It's about 75 degrees right now outside, so I don't think it'll take terribly long, and it's not too humid. The other thing, when you're picking a varnish, make sure you're using an oil-based varnish. This one's a SPAR Marine Varnish from Rust-Oleum, and it is oil-based. The oil-based SPAR varnishes are much more flexible, and especially for marine applications, or really anything that is going to move and flex a little bit, you don't want to use anything polyurethane-based, because it will be more brittle and a hard shell once it dries, versus the oil-based SPAR varnish, which will give it a nice protective, smooth, hard finish, but also stay flexible. That's why you see it used in marine applications quite often, even on the hull of wood boats and on any sort of furnishings inside a lot of sailboats. So we're going to let this dry overnight, and we'll come back once it's dry. Make sure it's not tacky. If it is tacky, give it additional time to dry. Again, it's all going to depend on the humidity and the temperature. And once it is dry to the touch, then you can put the second coat on. And I think we're going to aim for maybe 3 or 4 coats. We'll see how it goes and how well the finish looks after 3 coats. And if it needs a 4th, we'll do that. Okay, the first coat is dried. Took a lot longer, I think, because it was cooler weather. Yesterday, I did put it outside under the sun, even though it was in the 60s. It wasn't very warm, but I think the UV from the sun helped get everything dry. The parts on the black lines here, they took a bit longer to dry. The section on the wood actually dried in about 7 or 8 hours, and the portions on the black lines, they took a solid 24, maybe even 30 hours to dry. So now we're ready to put the second coat on. I'm going to go ahead and get that started, and hopefully we'll be able to get that dried a little bit quicker by placing it outside and letting it get some sun. And once that's cured, we're going to put a third coat on as well, and then evaluate what it looks like. Make sure all of the patchiness here is gone from there being too thin of a coat, and go from there. Coat number 2 is all dried up. We're about to get coat number 3 on, and as you can tell, some of that splotchiness is starting to go away. You still see a few little spots like that, but for the most part, it's starting to get pretty even. So we're going to get coat number 3 on and let it dry and go from there. And there it is. Table's all finished, coated. Should last us plenty long, with a nice durable finish on it. It's a little bit dusty, gotta wipe it down, but looks great and shiny.